The V-Strom 1000 in one way or another has been around a fair old while now. It launched in 2002, which in 2021 makes it 19 years old. Maths. For 2020, Suzuki completely updated the V-Strom. They called it a 1050 XT. They've made it old to make it look new and changed a bunch of other things for Euro 5 that they're hoping are going to give this older bike a little bit more life. Welcome to the V-Strom 1050 XT review. For the new V-Strom 1050 XT, we can kind of break the upgrades down from the previous model into two categories. The first of those is an aesthetic upgrade that brings with it some kind of functional changes, and an electronics upgrade which brings the bike very much into the 21st century. It brings it into Euro 5, and we get some really nice changes to the user experience as a result. We've now got an electronic throttle, which brings with it cruise control, which is never an upgrade to be sniffed at on a touring or adventure bike. And we've now got modes. Modes change the throttle response, so you can have a gentler or more abrupt throttle response from the bike. On top of that, we've got cornering ABS, which is now adjustable, so in theory a little bit better. And it retains the traction control that Suzuki have had for a while, which is absolutely fantastic. The new 1050 has also had a little bit of a bump in power. I'm not really sure how Euro 5 that is or how deliberate that is from Suzuki, but like a lot of other bikes, we have gained some more power and we have gained some more torque in the motor. There is no displacement change. The 1050 thing is very much a marketing name, rebadging of the bike situation. The engine is essentially the same, it's just a little bit quicker and a little bit more torquey. Underneath all that is a very similar V-Strom to the one that came before, but just in a kind of vintage clothing set. That aesthetic change, while also looking pretty cool, I like it at least, has a couple of functional changes that are really nice. The first one is you now have an adjustable screen. On the old V-Strom, that was something you had to screw out, screw back in, and this one's just on a clip, but you can't really do it while riding. You can, but it's super awkward. You have to stand up, reach around the front. It just doesn't work super nice. And the other one is we've got a new dash. The new dash is kind of part Casio watch, part something from Ghost in the Shell, but the functionality and the readability of it is really, really good and makes for quite a nice development from the old system. We've also got some new switchgear, which works well. I think as a user and an owner, that stuff is quite easy to jump into, understand, and get on with. Suzuki have definitely gotten a little bit bold with the marketing for the V-Strom 1050 XT. If you jump into the website or any of the marketing materials, you'll see the word adventure thrown around a lot. You'll see a lot of off-road riding shots, power slides, and other things. But in reality, those shots are done by people that are really, really good and riding someone else's bike. And when you ride the V-Strom 1050 XT off-road, it's not particularly comfortable. It doesn't really feel like it belongs there and has some quite stark limitations. If you go into riding this bike off-road in a way where you have low expectations and you accept that it's capable of riding gravel roads at a mediocre pace, it'll be fine, you won't be disappointed. But if you're not there and you want more from it, this is probably not the bike for you. The first limitation is most definitely the basic suspension setup. One of the things we discovered with this bike when we took it off-road is that the suspension does respond very well to the clickers, but the stock setting is very closed up. Very similar to the old bike, it feels quite the same in how they've got the setting, and it has some of the same limitations as that bike had, even on the road. But because it's so closed up, it pings off every rock. The rebound is really, really slow, so it doesn't come back from hitting bumps. The shock doesn't like surprises. And while that gets a lot better when you speed up the compression and you speed up the rebound, it still doesn't feel that good. It's just not really a bike that's set up for riding off-road. You have the same issue with the riding position, the handlebars, the foot peg, the relationship between all of those, the road tires. none of it really works, and it makes it kind of hard to tell what actually the limit is. The other big frustration that we came across when we did take the V-Strom off-road, we rode a little bit of single track on it, a little bit of ruts, is immediately you come across the fact it has no ground clearance, and that, as a person riding that bike, makes it really nerve-wracking. It's very naked underneath. It has an exposed oil cooler. If you put a sump guard on it, you're going to lose even more ground clearance, and it just wants to catch on every single rock on the ground. Rocks flick up from the tires, and it's just constantly a little bit nerve-wracking. You can solve some of those problems, but even if you do, I don't think you're ever going to get to the point where the V-Strom feels comfortable when you ride it off-road. On the road, however, the V-Strom is a fantastic motorcycle. That starts with how well it handles, carries through to the engine, and when you add in the fact that this bike, if you like the styling, now looks really good, you have something that the V-Strom just wasn't before. One of the nicest things when you first get on the V-Strom, and for me this stood out straight away, is how little learning it takes to understand what this bike's gonna do. From the first roundabout all the way to the time I gave it back, I knew exactly what it was going to do, how it was going to handle, and as a result, I didn't have to think about learning to ride it. That comes from two key traits. The first of those is how easy it is to get the bike to turn. It's not the fastest handling bike in the world, but it takes very little effort and input to the handlebars to get it to lean over. And once it's leant over, the bike stays exactly where you put it. So you put it on a certain angle, it will hold that angle for you, and that makes it a bike that doesn't take any understanding. It's not trying to sit up, you don't have to keep counter steering it, you don't have to do anything other than tell it to go right, and it will just keep going right. That makes a lovely, lovely touring bike, because you can then start to ride it with quite a lot of purpose and know that it's always doing the same thing. Part of that, I think, is because of the suspension. The suspension on the road in stock setting is very firm for a street touring-y sort of bike. It doesn't have a lot of wallow, and that enables the bike to hold its line quite well. When you get on the brakes, it doesn't dive that much. When you get on the gas, it doesn't squat that much, and it's never trying to get out of shape, which means you don't really need to do a lot. There is a little bit of a limitation with the suspension, which I'll come on to in a bit. But as an all-round package, this bike excels all the way up to the point of like riding really purposefully. If you try to ride it like a sports bike and you're really aggressive with it, you find some limitations. It's not that bike. But for everyone from a beginner right up to the point of really purposeful, enthusiastic street riding, the V-Strom works really, really nicely. So with the suspension on the road, there is a limit to what it's capable of dealing with. And when you reach that limit, you get a little bit of chatter from the front end. It was a side effect of us changing the suspension to ride it off-road, that when we came back on the road and started riding quickly again, that chatter was gone, but it was because we'd opened the fork up so much. By making the rebound a bit quicker, the fork was able to respond to the bumps in the road a little bit better. And after a bit more playing around, we found a sweet spot where it wasn't as open as we had it off-road, but it wasn't back to the stock setting, and it dealt with UK roads much, much better. Predominantly that chatter comes when you're leant over. The front kind of moves around a little bit, and it's a strange feeling because unlike some chatter where you feel like you're gonna lose the front end, V-Strom doesn't do that, doesn't really change anything. The front wheel just feels like it's chattering a little bit. I still felt comfortable, it still had a lot of grip there, but getting rid of that feeling made it a much nicer bike to ride on the road. Open the compression up a few clicks, open the rebound up a few clicks, and it kind of makes this bike a much nicer bike to ride on the street. On the same note, the rear shock, where it's quite closed up, also has a really big dislike of harsh holes. Now in the UK, our roads are sometimes very nice and sometimes not very good. We have a lot of potholes and speed bumps and bumpy back roads. and the V-Strom kind of was a little bit limited on those in terms of comfort. Now, there's always going to be a trade-off when you have an adventure bike with long, comfy suspension. It then doesn't handle very well. And the V-Strom's kind of at the other end of the spectrum where they've made it a bit stiffer, but some of those harsher bumps are, well, they feel harsh. In spite of those small limitations, surprisingly, the V-Strom excels on those kind of very British back roads. The B roads and the A roads are the home of this bike, and it's really easy to ride. In the same way as it's what makes a GS so easy to ride on the street, is that it's effortless and it deals with all those changes in the surface. The Suzuki is very similar. It deals with those transitions, those bumps that quite often upset stiff bikes very well. And when the road opens up a little bit and you've got more sweeping curves, it's stiff enough to deal with those. If you live in the UK or you live in Europe and you want a bike that's going to be really, really good on the road, but still have enough legs to get you to where you want to go, the V-Strom is a fantastic bike. Part of that package as well is the brakes. I don't normally talk about brakes this early in a review in the actual road section. It's normally an accessory thing, but the brakes on the V-Strom 1050 are quite clearly street brakes, and they're really, really good. They have great power, they're really immediate, they feel fantastic at the lever. And the only limitation I have with them is that for people with smaller hands, I think the lever sits quite a long way out, even when it's on the closest adjustment. One of the surprising things with the new 1050 is that despite not having a displacement increase, even though it says it does, is that the bump in power and torque does make a really nice boost to this bike. It's not enormous. You're not going to get off it and go, wow, like my mind has been blown. I'm now a converted V-Strom 1050 rider. But if you've got a V-Strom 1000 now, the new engine is definitely better. The torque curve has been changed a little bit. It puts the torque in a slightly nicer place. And that extra power allows you to ride in a smoother way. You don't need to change gears quite as much. You're in a better part of the power for twisty roads more. And really my only limitation with the gearing setup and the engine is that I think the top gear could be a little bit taller for motorway use. It sits at about 5,000 RPM at 80 miles an hour, so 130 kilometers an hour. And really it feels like it could be sat a little bit lower. If that top gear was a tiny bit taller and you had more of a cruising speed of 80 and 3,500 to 4,000 RPM, I feel like the bike would be much happier and a little bit less revier on those motorway miles. I think one of the other things that Suzuki have done really, really well with this bike, and we saw this very much in our retro versus modern episode, is that the fueling on it is superb. Like a lot of Euro 5 bikes, there is a slight bump when you open the throttle, a little but from there all the way to the rev limiter, it is silky smooth, which means rolling on in a corner, turning the throttle hard, whatever you want to do with it, it just deals with it really nicely. It makes it, it kind of adds to that predictability that is with everything else in this bike, as well as making this a really nice bike to ride on more open roads. And as is often the case with bikes that are really well fueled, the V-Strom is quite easy to ride around town and quite difficult to stall. The Suzuki have their clutch assist feature where as you feed the clutch out, the bike picks the revs up slightly as well, which definitely helps with its slow speed riding. But between that and having quite a smooth roll on and consistent performance at the throttle, it makes it just a quite easy bike to live with on the day-to-day as well. On the details front, Suzuki have improved the V-Strom 1050 in a very simplistic way. All of the points that you touch and that improve your user experience have got better. They've got better in kind of quite a functional way. The switchgear is nicer, it looks better, and it's really well laid out. The dash is the same, it's well designed, the layout and the reading of it is very easy to do while on the move. Things are where they should be, the menus are easy to navigate, the settings are easy to change. I think if you're coming from a previous V-Strom, you'll quite quickly notice as well that They've tidied up a few of the other lackluster bits. The mirrors have got a little bit nicer. A few of the other metal touches have got better, but they haven't gone the whole hog. This isn't a complete refresh. They haven't tidied up all of those things that are now looking quite dated. And compared to some of the rivals for this bike, the finish in some areas is maybe not quite as polished as it could be. It's still functional, it still works really well, but some of the other brands and the more European brands especially are really pushing that side of their bikes quite a long way. The V-Strom 1050 as a package isn't particularly different to the V-Strom 1000 that came before it. It's doing a lot of the same things really well. It's a good road bike. It's a good road bike if you like to ride a bit quicker. And it's a good road bike if you do any of the other things you might use a road bike for. Commuting, touring, just as a general do-it-all bike. The V-Strom is good. It really, really works well. For those of you that want a little more pizzazz from your bike, you want to be scared a little bit by it, you want to ride really quickly, this is not your bike. This is a bike for people that like super smooth, efficient, capable motorbikes, but are not looking to have their eyeballs come out the back of their head every time they crack the throttle open. If you're into that no fuss bike, that bike that's going to be a super good commuter or make going down to the south of France or going out on weekend trips really easy and effortless and still let you ride pretty quickly, the V-Strom is definitely the bike for you. I hope you've enjoyed this review of the V-Strom 1050 XT and it leaves you with a little bit better idea of what the bike's about, what it's good for and what it's not good for. If you like this video and you want to see more adventure bike reviews, go and check out some of our other ones or hit that subscribe button so you get notifications when we release new videos. We've always got projects that we're working on and videos coming out, so hopefully you stick around. If you haven't bought one yet and you'd like some really nice Brake Magazine clothing or stickers or to buy some of the kit that we use in our videos, we sell all of that through our online shop. This jumper is a great example. It's our Mustang jumper, really high quality, beautifully made, designed by me. If you want to see those, you can find the link in the description. And otherwise, remember, life's better when you're riding.